I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 122 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. This meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to standing orders. Before we proceed, I would like to make a few comments for the benefit of witnesses and members. Please wait until I recognise you by name before speaking. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. Please address all comments through the chair. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and a motion adopted on Monday, September 16, 2024, the committee is resuming its study of the impact of the reopening of the cod fishery on Newfoundland and Labrador and Quebec. I want to say a huge welcome to our witnesses for our first panel. We have from the Atlantic Groundfish Council, Sylvie Lapointe, President, and of course from Icewater Seafoods Incorporated, Alberto Weirm, President and Chief Executive Officer. And from Ocean Choice International, we have Kerry Bonnell, Vice President, Sustainability and Engagement. Thank you for taking time to appear today. You will each have 5 minutes or less for your opening statement. Ms. Lapointe, you have the floor.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank the committee for inviting the Atlantic Groundfish Council to appear before you today and to contribute to your study on northern cod. Our offshore cod members are adjacent to the resource, family-owned and operated businesses in Newfoundland and Labrador, including the Wareham family from Arnold's Cove and the Sullivan family from Calvert. Combined, our members employ more than 2,000 people from over 300 communities throughout Newfoundland and Labrador. This includes hundreds of crew members in our offshore operations that work year-round and live primarily in rural communities, contributing to regional economic development. The return of a commercial cod fishery in Newfoundland and Labrador is something that we have all remained hopeful for and committed to. The AGC and its members continue to be invested in the growth of this resource and its long-term sustainability. In this regard, we recognize the importance of Canada continuing its responsibility to be stewards of this iconic cod stock, and we will continue to contribute to this goal. Over the last 3 decades, we have been working to rebuild the northern cod stock through continued engagement with Fisheries and Oceans Canada and other stakeholders at every opportunity available, including participating in and contributing to northern cod science assessments, advisory committee meetings, and working groups. Of note, our commitment has included a $9 million fishery improvement project in partnership with the Sustainable Fisheries Partnership with customers like Marks & Spencer, Young Seafood and Thistle Seafoods from the United Kingdom, Cisco France, Highliner Foods from Canada, United States, financially contributing to it. Our FIP brings together academia, government, supply chain partners, and industry. The FIP is conducting world-class groundbreaking research on cod migration and stock composition. Our Northern Cod Acoustic Tracking Project has improved our understanding of cod migration and genetic linkages. This knowledge is crucial to long-term fisheries management and to building a Marine Stewardship Council certified fishery. The latest assessment of northern cod confirms that the stock has been in the cautious zone of DFO's precautionary approach framework since 2016 and is estimated to be 24% above the limit reference point in 2024. Results from the science assessment show that northern cod stock size has remained stable and relatively unchanged since 2016. Similar to previous years, we see that fishing mortality remains low and natural mortality continues to be high. We note that there are some positive signals in the stock, such as above-average fish condition, a wide range of ages, indicating that older fish are surviving, broad dispersal of the biomass stock across stock units, continued recruitment at about 80% of historic levels, and increased fishery catch rates. Furthermore, northern cod is now the second largest groundfish stock in Atlantic Canada, behind Unit 1 redfish in terms of total biomass. Based on these factors, this is no longer a stewardship fishery, but rather a commercial fishery, consistent with the stock's cautious zone status. Without knowing until now that the stock has been in the cautious zone for 8 years, there has already been potential revenue lost from this fishery. The economic and societal success of the northern cod fishery in Newfoundland and Labrador requires a balanced fishery, which includes inshore, midshore, and offshore components. A balanced fishery will ensure continued access to premium global markets year-round, longer operating seasons for vessels and plants, which promotes more year-round, higher-paying employment in coastal communities, and an environment conducive for investment in industry modernization and technology. Our sector supports a balanced fishery that promotes the viability and stability of all fleet sectors, and within this context, the Canadian offshore sector was provided with access to northern cod for the 2024-25 commercial fishery. We continue to propose a phased approach that will see our share increase consistent with historical levels over time as the fishery grows. Going forward, as has been acknowledged by DFO, industry, and other stakeholders, there is a need to begin assessing a suite of candidate harvest strategies for northern cod that determine appropriate fishery removal levels for the stock as it moves throughout the cautious zone of the precautionary approach framework. This will require the determination of an upper stock reference point and accompanying harvest rate, which has not yet been established for this stock. We welcome the Department's commitment to convene the Northern Cod Working Group to complete this important work as soon as possible, and in order to have an approved harvest control rule prior to the 2025 season. We look forward to working collaboratively together to achieve an appropriate harvest strategy for northern cod to support a long-term sustainable fishery. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you for that. We'll now go to Mr. Weir for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Many people have spoken to this committee about the start of the cod moratorium on July 2nd, 1992, and its end on June 26, 2024. I'd like to start by talking about the time in between those dates. After the moratorium, most people and communities across Newfoundland and Labrador moved on from cod to other species of fish, other industries, and some to other provinces. But the Icewater Seafoods plant in Arnold's Cove, Newfoundland has continued to process cod, and only cod. To some, that might seem ill-advised, but Icewater Seafoods and the people of Arnold's Cove defied the odds. 32 years later, we are the only plant in North America focused solely on producing premium quality North Atlantic cod year-round. Many people understandably attribute that to the relentless commitment of my late father, Bruce Wareham. He knew that while Newfoundland has a 500-year history of cod, it is a history of quantity and not quality. Newfoundland cannot compete in premium global cod markets or maximize the value of the species for people and communities by focusing on quantity. It has to be focused on quality. My father recognized that 30 years ago, and we have continued to focus on quality ever since. We completed a 3-year, $14 million upgrade in 2020, investing in technology needed to ensure Arnold's Cove plant remains one of the top cod producing plants in the world. We employ more than 220 local people who we proudly call our cod experts. Their pay is among the highest wages in the seafood processing industry in Atlantic Canada, and their pride and loyalty is clear. 2 employees have celebrated 50 years of service, and there are currently 21 employees with over 40 years of service. What we have accomplished together is incredible. Our cod is supplied to premium markets, with the majority going to the UK and France, the 2 largest cod markets in the world, for premium quality cod. Icewater is one of only a few plants in the world approved to supply cod to Marks & Spencer. Even with a small cod quota, we have proven that it can be done. The decision for our one company and one community not to move on from cod has been critical to the local and regional economy for over 20 years. As of fall 2023, the company has contributed approximately $272 million that goes back to the local economy through fish purchases from inshore harvesters, direct wages and salaries to employees, costs paid to local transportation and logistic companies for collecting the raw material throughout Newfoundland, and the products and services we've sourced from local companies for the operation of the plant. Let me be clear. None of this happens without year-round supply. That means that none of this happens without Canadian, or in this case, Newfoundland offshore harvesters being part of the fishery. We call it a balanced fishery. Marks & Spencer require cod 12 months of the year, regardless if it is purchased from Iceland, Norway, or Newfoundland. Newfoundland accounts for just 3% of the 2024 world supply of North Atlantic cod. We are not in a position to negotiate a seasonal supply. When Minister Laboutier announced the end of the cod moratorium in June, it was a great day for the community of Arnold's Cove. While the Canadian offshore harvesters' quota was only 6%, the economic value it enables is much higher. It allows northern cod to compete those year-round global markets. That means more work for plant workers and better price per pound for inshore harvesters who benefit from the year-round model. In 2024 alone, that price increase to inshore harvesters is estimated to be $10 million. I know some have highlighted to this committee just how fast inshore harvesters caught and landed their cod this year. In fact, they caught more in 48 hours than the offshore harvesters were allocated for the entire year. But a successful fishery isn't just catching the fish and landing it. It has to be focused on landing a quality product that can be processed and sold at premium cod markets year-round. The top cod fishing nations in the world, Iceland and Norway, have a year-round model. The majority of their cod is caught by trawlers that fish during the winter months. They have maintained MSC sustainability certification, the global standard for seafood sustainability. their fisheries are successful. If Canada wants a cod fishery that can compete on the world stage in premium markets, it cannot be an inshore-only model. It has to be a balanced fishery that with all sectors participating. We know what works. We've proven it in Arnold's Cove. We ask this committee to have the courage to support priority for the inshore harvesters without shutting out local offshore harvesters, because that is the only model that works. Thank you.
We'll now go to Mr. Bonnell for 5 minutes or less, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to appear before the Standing Committee on Fisheries and Oceans. Ocean Choice is a family-owned and operated Newfoundland and Labrador company started over 20 years ago by brothers Martin and Blaine Sullivan from the Southern Shore, an area of the province with deep roots in the fishery. Our company employs nearly 1,500 people from over 300 communities throughout the province. Over the past couple of decades, Ocean Choice has made major investments in our groundfish operations, including preparing for northern cod. Chief upon those investments was the construction and introduction of the MV Calvert to the fleet in 2020. At a cost of more than $60 million, this is the most modern and innovative green-class groundfish vessel in the Canadian fleet, employing approximately 80 local crew members on a year-round basis. A lot of opinions have been expressed on the topic of northern cod since the reopening decision in July. We are all entitled to our opinions, but not our own facts. Here are the facts on northern cod from our standpoint. Northern cod is the second largest groundfish resource in Atlantic Canada and the third largest cod fishery in the world, with a total biomass of more than 500,000 metric tons. DFO's 2024 stock assessment confirmed that the northern cod stock is approximately 24% above the limit reference point, the boundary between the cautious and critical zones of DFO's precautionary approach framework. To the best of my knowledge, every fish stock in Atlantic Canada that is in the cautious zone of the PA framework has a commercial fishery. Why should northern cod be treated any differently? The FFAW have repeatedly referred to a 40-year policy commitment on the first 115,000 metric tons of northern cod. No such historical policy commitment exists. Participation of offshore harvesters in the northern cod fishery in the post-1977 era was deliberate and carefully considered by government. The long-standing government allocation policy is commitment towards priority for the inshore, not exclusivity. Key elements of that policy were adopted in 1979 by DFO at the Corner Brook Conference that defined priority to be 2/3 inshore, 1/3 offshore, reinforced in 1983 when the government adopted the Kirby Task Force report, and reviewed and endorsed in 2004 when the government adopted a policy framework for the management of fisheries on Canada's Atlantic coast. The 2024 allocation decision is one that is based on well-documented public policy that provides priority access to the inshore and Indigenous groups in Newfoundland and Labrador, but also respects the historical rights of the offshore sector. The misinformation regarding the Newfoundland and Labrador offshore sector is especially disappointing. Some misconceptions about trawling linger from pre-moratorium fisheries, but others are perpetuated by groups attempting to advance their own agendas. The seafood industry has changed drastically over the past 3 decades. The offshore sector today adheres to rigorous standards including independent observer coverage, spatial closures, vessel monitoring systems, and many other measures to minimize environmental impact for all species. These measures are essential for preserving marine ecosystems while meeting global food demand responsibly. In Iceland, for example, more than 124,000 metric tons of cod was harvested by trawling in 2022, accounting for 52.4% of cod landings for that year. In fact, trawling has been the predominant gear used in Iceland to fish cod for more than a generation. With that knowledge that the Icelandic cod fishery is considered the most sustainable in the world, it's illogical to reconcile the current debate here that 1,080 metric tons of northern cod harvested by the mobile gear sector will somehow do irreparable harm. Offshore fishing vessels, such as the ones operated by OCI, employ Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. They operate year-round and land at local wharves and cold storage facilities where they offload and are serviced, providing millions of dollars in direct and indirect wages and economic spin-offs in coastal communities. In the case of northern cod, virtually all the quota harvested on our offshore vessels will be further processed at Icewater Seafoods in Arnold's Cove, creating local employment and extending operating seasons. For those worried about repeating past mistakes, keep in mind that the 2024 decision established a very conservative exploitation rate of approximately 5%. Most cod fisheries today have exploitation rates in excess of 20%, and northern cod rates exceeded 50% leading up to the moratorium. Furthermore, northern cod is assessed annually, and exploitation rates can be adjusted accordingly based on survey results. What should be most celebrated in the reopening decision is domestic allocations were provided to Newfoundland and Labrador inshore, northern, Indigenous, and offshore interests to the sole benefit of this province. That's 18,000 metric tons of cod that will be harvested, processed, and marketed in our province over longer operating seasons, making us far more competitive globally. This is a very good start to a reopened commercial cod fishery. In closing, and perhaps the best indicator of where the truth lies on this issue, is last week's federal court ruling on the FFAW's injunction request to suspend the 2024 decision. In a form that deals solely in facts, the court soundly rejected the FFAW, stating, among other things, that the court cannot issue an interlocutory injunction when the remedy the applicants seek is precluded by their own actions. That fish has swum. Thank you for considering my input. I welcome any comments or questions.